Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the US presidential election. The upcoming election is going to be very important and I would say very interesting also. This is going to be the second term of the president of USA, Mr. Donald Trump. And as we all know that he's a very controversial president. If you remember when he took charge, there was so much going on. Whether you talk about the NAFTA issue, you talk about the wall between the Americans and the Mexicans. You talk about 2% of the GDP to be pooled in the NATO. Whether the country which was financially totally, I would say, in an absolute crunch. I'm talking about Greece, but still they were forced to buy 2% or the American jets and the equipment and pool in the NATO. You talk about the decision regarding the Russians. You talk about the European Union. You talk about the Middle East. You talk about South China Sea. You talk about the trade war between the Chinese and the Americans. Or you talk about any other thing, wherever Mr. Trump has put his foot down. I'm not yet talking about the domestic issues. They are huge as well. A lot of U-turns. The biggest was regarding the JCPOA. I'm talking about the Iranian nuclear deal, and we all know that everything was concluded. Yet once Mr. Donald Trump came into power, everything changed. And then you talk about Israel, the kind of relationship and the kind of engagement the president has there. If you remember, his first foreign visit was in Saudi Arabia, and then from there he went to Israel. And about $436 billion worth of deals were signed at that time. I still remember the way he was asking the crown prince that, well, Saudi Arabia is a rich country, they can afford, they can do this, they can do that, and it's peanuts for you. And he was shaking his head and he was just buying the equipment, whether it was required or not. That's what deals are all about. You talk about India and the Americans, that is also pretty interesting. But now, since we will be talking about the upcoming election, that is going to be very interesting because the former vice president of the Democrat Party, who was with Mr. Obama, Mr. Joseph Biden, or he's known as Mr. Joe Biden, he's going to be contesting against the current president, Mr. Donald Trump of the Republican Party. And let's see where it leads. Current scenario is very interesting as the polls or the overall data that's been collected. I think the graph of Biden is comparatively much better than that of Mr. Donald Trump. So we'll be talking in detail about that in our today's program. And on top, we'll also be talking about the legitimacy of the results. As we all know, whether you talk about Al Gore's result with Bush, we all know what happened in Florida. You talk about this last election between Donald Trump and the former First Lady. We all know that was very, you talk about the popular vote, then you talk about the electoral vote, and then eventually the number of votes were less, yet the president ended up becoming the number one top-notch person, the most powerful man, who is known as the President of the United States of America. Now, Americans believe that they need to look inward and start focusing on their own fault lines. This is what Mr. Trump says. But since this topic is so huge, but let me introduce you to our panelists first. We have with us Dr. Nazir Mahmood Saab. Dr. Nazir Mahmood Saab is a senior columnist, is a journalist, is a writer. Thank you very much, Nazir Saab, for taking out your time and talking to us. And we also have with us Dr. Uqab Malik, again needs no introduction, as a senior professional and a foreign affairs expert. Dr. Uqab Malik, pleasure to have you as well, sir. Thank you so much. And we'll also be talking to Rauf Hassan Saab, who's a senior political analyst, and we'll be also taking his input. But let me start off from Dr. Nazir Mahmood Saab. Dr. Saab, we did so many shows. Remember when Donald Trump took charge as the president of the United States of America? A lot of expectations were there. But then we realized that this man, he's done a few good things, but he has also committed a lot of blunders. Now, looking at the current scenario in which a lot of people blame, the media blames him, the opposition parties, the individuals, even within the ranks of the Republicans, there is a lot of debate going on regarding his overall performance as far as controlling the coronavirus is concerned. Now, it is believed that he generally failed, and so many people died, so many got infected as well. And now, if you look at the overall graph for the upcoming election, I think Joe Biden has an edge. Would you agree with me, sir?
Well, it's difficult to say at the moment. Apparently, it appears that Joe Biden does have an edge. But that edge was there with Hillary Clinton also. If you remember 4 years back, Um, Nobody expected that Donald Trump would win with that much majority, but he did. So there are, some unexpected results. When we want, I mean, I personally think that, it would be better for America and for the rest of the world if Joe Biden wins. But that may be my personal wishful thinking. So apparently, all indications are there that Donald Trump is losing his popularity. He's at this moment he's at the lowest ebb of his popularity, especially due to his mishandling or his simple inability to manage two very current things. One was this racial disturbance that was there, and two, this coronavirus crisis. So, as we see that in both these challenges, he has miserably failed. How? First, let's talk about COVID-19. COVID-19, he kept issuing statements as if it was not a problem at all. When the summer will come, it will evaporate. The virus will evaporate somewhere. So his approach was highly unscientific. It had no basis. Probably Donald Trump doesn't read anything. He has no background of any, scientific or intellectual background knowledge. That is minimum background knowledge that an educated person should have. So this person, Donald Trump, is highly lacking in that. And it was not new. People knew about it earlier also, but still he won. So number one, he did not manage COVID-19 crisis. America out of 600,000, over 600,000 deaths around the world, nearly 25%, 20 to 25% deaths happened only in the United States, which is a big number. It's a huge number. So that shows that he was unable to manage it. He was unable to respond properly at the right moment in the right way. Secondly, his approach to tackle the racial disturbances. Now, racism, institutionalized racism is there in America. Everybody knows about it. But of course, there were better ways of handling it. Now, he kept issuing his statements like, when looting starts, shooting will start. Now, this kind of statement, if President of America issues,
and then he
that
said
shows,
that we have got professionals and they have got some great guns, and he was in fact threatening his own people. And if you remember
exactly.
that particular incident where people were protesting outside the White House, and he went to the church, and the way those people were handled, they were not used to that kind of aggression by the law enforcement agencies. And everybody witnessed that on the television screens. And then when Mr. Trump was asked, he said, well, nothing happened of that sort, if you remember.
Yes. So, but that shows at heart somewhere, that racism is there within this person, within Donald Trump. Racism is there. And he is, though he tries to hide that, he is a white supremacist. He has been issuing statements, and then he did not openly show his sympathy towards victims of racial discrimination. So what that shows that, he has alienated himself with American people. Now, increasingly, even white people are realizing that, electing Trump was not the right choice. But how that white majority, because of course, election will greatly depend on white majority. Though blacks are hardly 13 or 14%, then there are Latinos. But, most of the people who are white there, they will ultimately decide who will become president of America in the next election. And once again, he is trying to ride on that racist, populist approach. And he thinks that as he projects himself as pro-white, white people will once again support him and he will win. But I doubt, and if that happens, because as I said that might happen, I remember in 2004, you rightly pointed out that, electoral problem was there in Florida, and when Al Gore lost, probably unfairly, but nobody expected
whose brother
that
was
George
the governor
W.
of
Bush,
Florida at that time, we all know.
Yes, and nobody expected that George W. Bush would win once again. Because, once it can be a fluke, it can be, something. But
now, that
then
is the reason, Nasir Mahmood Sahab, the primary reason is about the legitimacy of the election results also. Sometimes you just see that Mr. X or Miss X is winning, and suddenly there's a total change by the next 2 hours or so. This is what we have witnessed in this last election also. But let me also ask Dr. Uqab Malik now. Couple of important facts, sir. You were there for about a year in USA lately. and I'm sure you must have observed various factors there as well. Talking about the Muslim vote, talking about the statement issued regarding Kashmir or for the Muslims by Mr. Joe Biden, I'm sure that is also going to be something very positive for his campaign. Then you talk about primarily, if you remember, that's everybody used to say that if Mr. Sandy Byrne, if you remember, if he was the person contesting instead of the lady, things would have been different. I mean, obviously there's a choice, and even right now, Joe Biden, I mean, he has emerged as a very tough candidate, I would say. Now, three things: legitimacy of the election and the results. Number two, the role of the white people from the Midwest primarily, people from Atlanta, Chicago, California, Louisiana, primarily all these southern states where there's a black majority, and then Hispanics in particular. What sort of a trend do you see? Because the kind of expectations we earlier had in the previous elections, a lot of black people, a lot of Hispanics, they did vote for Trump also. Okab Malik.
Well, we have to look in retrospect. In the last elections, Trump had not had any capacity where he was governing. He had no administrative position, so nobody really knew who he was except for a TV personality. Now, however, after 4 years of a dismal performance, massive increase in fissures between ethnicities, racial, as well as partly sectarian, religious, gender, in fact, as well, then he's shown his true colors. So it's not the same situation as it was 4 years ago. We know this person for what he is now. A leader is supposed to lead and unite. This person absolutely divided everything, divided the country. The United States has gone back decades in its civil rights campaigns, for example. The division between the blacks and Latinos and the whites is extraordinary now. If you look back in the 60s, how strong it was, the problems that were occurring there in civil rights movement, I think there could be a comparison. That was 50 years plus ago. Now, when you talk about, I'm using your term now, talk about, but when you talk about California, I've just been looking at a survey by the Financial Times, and in that survey, the national elections in the United States is based upon not one person, one proportional representation. It's based on the college electorate system. So, in this particular survey, out of the total, 270 is needed to win. That makes it what, 541, for example, 540. Joe Biden is predicted right now, according to the survey, to have 308 votes in these different states already, electoral college votes. Top of the list is California. There's New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Washington, Massachusetts, many of the states. These are large population states with large ethnic minority participants or populations. On the other hand, like you said, the Midwest, there are other large, Indiana, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, large populations of hardcore Trump supporters and Republican in general. The contesting grounds, for example, look what's happened in Florida, massive increase of COVID-19 infections and deaths in Florida, for example, which was a state, a Republican state. But now it looks likely that the senior white vote is going to go towards Biden primarily because President Trump has done dismally in his performance as far as this is concerned, pandering to superstition and pandering to non-scientific opinions, which is not going to do any good to anybody because COVID-19 is a virus. It's based on understanding science and biology, for example.
Yep.
And you're not going to defeat it without understanding that. So he, being a real illiterate in science terms, has been leading this country down the wrong path. I think a lot of people are recognizing that and have been suffering greatly because of this. And as it said, there was another, we look at the odds of who's going to win. just a few days ago, the probability that Joe Biden is going to win is 61.9% at this moment in time. I read another article just today. Whilst President Trump has gone down to 36.4. What does that tell you? 2/3 as opposed to 1/3. Now, you're correct. Mr. Nazir is correct partly in indicating that this is still a few months away and anything can change. But looking at the track record over the past few years and especially over the past few months, it doesn't look good for Trump. I'm particularly very happy with that.
Now, Nazir Mahmood Saab, if you remember during the previous election, when Donald Trump became the president, I mean, a lot of people used to say, a lot of writers used to write about it, that Kremlin or the Russians played a very important role. Whereas, if you remember at that time, there was this issue of emails that were hacked from the account of the former First Lady, Hillary Clinton. And that also resulted in her loss. I mean, a lot of people believe that. And then, if you remember, even currently, it seems that when you talk about the upcoming elections, things won't be the same. Two major areas identified by you was about the racial discrimination, the Black Lives Matter issue, plus on top, the mishandling of COVID. Now, when it comes to creating jobs, or for that matter, looking inwards, innovate America, make in America, America first, I think a lot of positive stuff has also been done. Now, since this COVID issue has taken over everything, but prior to that, if you remember, there were job creations. There was a lot of old factories. They started functioning as well. So even good things happened as well. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Nazir?
Yes. Now, there are two opinions about that. There is no doubt that the first 3 years of Donald Trump, economically speaking, there was a lot of job creation and America had the upsurge, bullish trend in American stock markets, and overall American economy was performing very well. I mean, some people give the credit to the previous Obama administration that whatever they did, as a result of that, now Donald Trump administration was reaping the fruits of the groundwork that was done during Obama. But that is a debatable question. What is not debatable is that there was definitely good economic performance during the first 3 years, whatever the reason, but that was there. So had that continued and had there been no COVID-19, and as a result, no downturn in economy, and had there been no racial tensions, probably Trump would have had another chance, just like George W. Bush won. Nobody expected him to win the second election, though George W. Bush had started 2 wars, one in Afghanistan and the other in Iraq. And even I was not expecting at that time, 15 years ago in 2004-16, that he would win. But George W. Bush won. But Dr. Uqab was very right that, this situation is quite different. And now people of America have seen this person act foolishly for 3 years, and not once, but repeatedly. His overall trend, he has never displayed any impressive performance in anything. So now what that shows that, even now this is time for American, even white people who voted for him. And as you said, that there were even black people and even there were women who voted for Trump. And that was surprising because Trump is a misogynist. Everybody knows, he has this inherent misogyny in him, but still there were some women who voted for him. But I don't think that this time this will happen, though his first 3-year performance was good. But this last year, or especially last 6 months, have been devastating. And not only, domestically, I think we should also look what he has done internationally. And that will play a role. He withdrew. Now, you narrated when you started this program, Faisal, you narrated very well what he has done. For example, the Israel issue, how he tried to push Palestinians, then how he acted with Narendra Modi. Trump never came out openly and he never condemned the illegal and unconstitutional annexation of Kashmir. So overall, he has been bad for the world also. He withdrew from climate agreement, Paris agreement. He withdrew. Then he had a strained relationship with even Europe. So all this show that his incapability to even handle international politics, not only domestically, I think he has failed internationally also. And that is going to have a very negative impact on American influence. And he has indirectly, he has wittingly or unwittingly, he has given a lot of space to China, which is good for
That's exactly
countries
what
like
I
us.
mean. When you said that, for the last 4 years, I think the last 6 months would be much heavier as compared to the previous 42 months of his being in office, uh, because the last months are important, and especially when you have witnessed this uh, black racial problem or COVID for that matter, because that involves lives. That is something very important. Now, another very important factor is, if you remember, when Mr. Modi was in United States of America, there was this huge gathering held. And if you remember, Mr. Donald Trump was present there, and everybody said that now he is also trying to capitalize on the Indian vote bank. And right after that, if you remember, Imran Khan Sahib was there on the uh, invitation of the United Nations. He was the main man invited there. And then he held a huge gathering there as well. So obviously, Pakistani diaspora, Indian diaspora, that matters a lot. Generally speaking, we are not sure where the people would vote, but looking at the mood, looking at the kind of mindset they have, it is going to be a very close contest. Maybe the numbers could really favor Mr. Joe Biden currently, but the actual results, they matter. The kind of money Trump has, the kind of connections he has. I mean, obviously, we do understand money matters everywhere, whether it's Pakistan or whether it's United States of America or otherwise. Now, two important factors here. Now, I'm coming to you, Aqab Malik. First of all, talking about, if you remember the issues, Kashmir, he has always said that he is ready to negotiate. He is ready to talk to the Indians and the Pakistanis, whereas the Indians again said that we are not in any position to talk to Pakistan. And prior to that, when Mr. Trump told Imran Khan Sahib, our Prime Minister, that, well, if both countries agree, he is ready to go forward. But again, the Indian pressure, in fact, nothing happened. Now, Joe Biden talks about the issue of Kashmir. He talks about the issue of Muslims. In fact, there's the statement today in the, and that's the top story, that on the first day, if he becomes the president, he's going to take a certain decision regarding the Muslims and he's going to make life easy for them. I think that is also going to be something very important. Then looking at the age, looking at the experience and the test and trial basis of Donald Trump, it seems that the next election would not be based primarily on the support for Democrats or on the support for Republicans. It has to be work oriented. Correct, sir?
Yes, obviously.
Go ahead.
As far as Joe Biden is concerned, he was at a conference, an engagement with a Muslim advocacy group called Engage Action, in which he said that he will, on the first day in office, repeal the Muslim ban. Now, the Muslim ban came in, then it had a lot of issues as far as the high courts were concerned, but then was upheld by the Supreme Court. So it's in effect from 7 different countries, although not some other countries such as Venezuela were also added to it, and North Korea, which are not Muslim. But irrespective of that, the idea there's a straightforward bias against Muslims as far as the Republicans are concerned, especially Trump, pandering to his vote, pandering to the right-wing evangelical Christians, which are about 90 to 100 million. There's a lot of votes in that. So he has a strong backing in that respect. And this was to do that, to get their votes and to support their ideas and to give them a way so he could maintain that control over people by the right-wing Christians especially. But also, you've got to recognize there's a high degree of propaganda going into this in the US. The US is very much an inward-looking country rather than outward-looking country, from what I gather. Having lived in Britain most of my life, I recognize that we tend to have a lot of issues on the TV and a lot of international news, but the United States is very different altogether. There's much less international news going into every household, with the exception of maybe individuals who look through the internet or specialist TV channels that they can look at, you've got a very low probability of most people in the United States understanding what's going on in the world. So that doesn't play an impact. But as far as the Muslims are concerned, this particular advocacy group said that they will try to bring 1 million Muslims to the voting booth so that they could support Joe Biden, sorry, not Joe Trump. But the thing of this is that that's not really going to be a major shift. Joe Biden has to look at all the different minority groups and all the affected groups that Trump has been very insensitive towards, and utilize that opportunity to get their support throughout. So the Muslims would be very happy. He'd repeal this. The business would probably go up. But I think once bitten, twice shy, once many of these Muslim countries have been affected, they've got used to a new normal. And as a result, they're going to wait to see what happens in American politics. So promises are not enough. And even if the law changes, I think people have changed the way they behave as well, as far as that's concerned, in the international community. They don't see the United States in the way they did before. I think it's very much negative. My year in last year, in fact, the whole of last year in the United States, and comparing it to a few years earlier when Obama was in power, when I was there as well for about a year, just under, I saw a massive change in the fissures between different communities. And I recognize that this is no longer the United States that I grew up thinking it was. And a lot of people have changed their opinion of the United States, and which is unfortunate for the United States, and it's a great country. So that there's a lot of work for Joe Biden to do now, I think, to rectifying the issues. But once you break something, you can never really fix it that quickly. It takes a long time for people to begin to trust the system again. And now with
but
the
Dr.
All Blacks,
Gab Malik, let me put a question for you here. Let me put a question. If you remember, on the 14th July 2020, in Wilmington, Delaware, the Vice President Joe Biden, in fact, was addressing, and he was speaking during a campaign event. And in fact, he threw light on something very important. He said that his single greatest concern is that this election could be stolen. And we might not know. He said that even during the last election, what happened in Pennsylvania, if you remember, until a month after the election, nobody knew who won. So things like that can trigger a lot of issues, basically. If Mr. Trump, he's loaded, he has lots of money, look at the kind of campaign he's running. And then, even during the last campaign, the kind of money is spent, given to women and all these people who were promoting him. There were a lot of scandals there as well. Do you believe that there is a probability, or there could be an inside job where, some wrongdoing could take place?
Obviously, in many countries, a lot of things like this do happen. The United States is not an exception in real terms. But however, they've built up a system that is generally fair and proportional. Yes, there is that issue, but one person having this effect, if this happens, now you look back at Al Gore when he lost election because Trump's brother was the governor in Florida, who gave the vote over to, sorry, not Trump, Bush's brother was the
Bush's
governor.
Brother.
And who gave the vote over to Bush, obviously, because there was a family linkage, and that was turned around. He didn't really contest it. The problem is, if this happens again, shame on the Democrats if they do not at all levels contest any issue like this. So they've got to put it into the print, they've got to put it into the airwaves that we will never accept anything like this, because this is the complete abrogation of democracy, the whole idea of what America is all about. So we think.
That is pretty interesting.
So
We've also been joined in by Rauf Hassan Saab, senior political analyst. Rauf Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Sir, thank you very much for talking to PTV World and taking your time out. Now, since we are talking about the upcoming US election, and both my guests, Dr. Gab Malik and Dr. Nazir Mahmood, they believe that two major factors are there which could basically go against the campaign of Mr. Donald Trump. One is about the issue of handling the COVID-19. There was this delay, there was this non-seriousness. And number two, regarding the racial and ethnic issues inside America, especially after the killing of Mr. George Floyd, if you remember, who was killed by the police. And then the kind of statements issued by Mr. Donald Trump and the kind of behavior we have all witnessed. I mean, what exactly is going on? Eventually, is that the 2/3 of the people, according to the polls, are supporting Biden, 1/3 are with Mr. Donald Trump. Your take, sir?
Well, I agree with your other analysts, that these are two of the major factors, which are possibly going to impact the elections later this year. But there is another factor which I think we must all talk about, which is the fractious and caustic divisions, that President Trump has unfortunately created, both within America as well as between America and so many other countries of the world. Most notably China. Only today, I think they've announced one of the consulates of the Chinese to be closed down. And there is the ongoing trade war. There is, United States pulling out of WHO, and there is United States, pulling out of so many other things, basically. And the distancing, which unfortunately has occurred between the United States and other European countries. So this has had an impact, and I think, this has had an impact, in the current evaluations of the American people, which are reflected, in the polls, with 75% going for Joe Biden. So these factors are important. I've spoken to some people there, feel that this possibly is going to be another major reason, that is going to impact the outcome of elections later this year. And then the number of times that President Trump has been caught on camera lying. And, for the President of the United States of America to be so caught on camera, actually blatantly lying, this is something, which has degraded the country itself. And I think, many Americans think of it that way. So, there's a spate of factors, which are going to come into play, when people go to the hustings, and, also the fact, that, the way he's trying to sort of motivate his ultra-right voters to continue voting for him, that can also have a negative impact, because American society does not come across as a homogeneous society any longer. And the number of people that I've spoken to, they hold President Trump solely responsible for that. There are still protests going on in America. And I think at least in a couple of states, President Trump has sent federal troops to tackle the demonstrations, which is the ultimate step, that the President of America can constitutionally take. So the fact, that he has had to resort to this ultimate step, speaks of the lack of options, which he is left with at this moment in time. So a large number of factors, will come into play as per my appraisal, when the election time arrives in the US.
All right. Now, Rao Saab, I'll just read out a few tweets, one from Mr. Joe Biden and two from Mr. Donald Trump. And then I've got a very interesting question for you after that also. Mr. Joe Biden first. He says, let me say what President Trump won't. Russian interference in our elections is a violation of our sovereignty. And if I'm the president, I'll respond accordingly. And we all know what he is referring to. Then Trump says in his tweet, he says, mail-in voting, unless changed by the courts, will lead to the most corrupt election in our nation's history. Then there is another tweet by Mr. Donald Trump. He says, so we catch Obama and Biden, not to even mention the rest of their crew spying on my campaign, and nothing happens. I hope not. If it were the other way around, 50 years for treason, never forget. I mean, the blame game has already started, Rao Saab, before even the election is taking place. And let me also put this question that, Rao Saab, it's very interesting to see the reaction of Mr. Donald Trump towards media. If he doesn't like someone, he gets personal. He would tell the person to shut up and sit down and will not let any other reporter or journalist put a question to him if that question is not according to his liking. Take the example of CNN. So how important the role of media would be in this particular election? Rauf Hassan Saab.
Very important. Very important. Media in contemporary elections, in contemporary times, plays a very important role. And in the United States of America at this moment in time, media is by and large against President Trump. And like you said so a short while ago, that he singles out journalists, whom he does not like, and then he tries to degrade them in public, and it's all on camera. Like I said, about his lying thing, it's all on camera. And I forgot to mention one thing, I think he's only the fourth president in the American history who has actually been impeached, not removed, but
Yeah.
impeached. Now that's another
Exactly.
major factor, because this is a stigma that he carries. Being impeached is a stigma that the President of the United States of America carries. And when he gets into the poll with the stigma, let me tell you, in the subconscious of those people who come to vote, this thing would be lurking. It's not going to vanish. It's not going to go away. So that also would be a factor, that will determine the outcome of the elections. So far as the other question is concerned, yes, that's right. Media is central to modern elections. I think the perception and reality gradually, the difference between perception and reality is changing to the advantage of perception. The perceptions that media generates is actually taken as reality. And at times, in fact, most of the times, that perception is not correct. It's contrary. At times, it is contrary to reality. But this is the way things are at this moment in time in the world, and this is the way. This is the extent to which media can actually impact the elections. In any country, look at our own country. Compare it with Pakistan. Look at the dominant role that media is playing in these days. Look at the dominant role that media plays in the 2018 elections, and possibly going to play an even more dominant role in the 2023 elections, which shall come in three years' time. So, he seems to be at the losing end, in virtually, any way that you would like to look at the forthcoming elections. In these 3.5 years, I think he's done more damage to America than any preceding president has done. He's changed the very ethos of America. He's changed the way people look at America now, anywhere outside of America, and even within America. And this is a perception which
A
has not
recent
changed for the
statement,
better.
if you remember, Rauf Saab, a recent statement of that was overruled by the court. I mean, thanks to the courts of the United States of America, at least justice prevails there, where he said all the students who are doing online study should go back to their respective countries. I mean,
that's
without
right.
even thinking of their future. And can you imagine?
So, this, like I said, so many other things, which have created divisions and fractiousness within America. This is another thing. And, bulk of the Americans jumped to the defense of those foreign students, So this also speaks of the unpopularity, which he has earned over a period of time during his incumbency as President of the United States of America. So all these factors are there. I think, so far as I'm concerned, basically, short of a miracle, the writing is on the wall. I mean, it's just a question of time, when we head into November and the elections are held. I don't think, there's a possibility. And of course, COVID has done immeasurable damage. Only yesterday he was talking about the need for wearing a mask. And by the way, this is the first time in about 5 months since the advent of COVID, that he has actually spoken about the need to wear a mask. And except for once or twice, I have never seen him wearing a mask. So what
Yeah, he
kind
was
of
wearing
leadership-
once recently.
Once
Yeah.
or twice, except for once or twice, as I said, I've never seen him wearing a mask. And when he was pleading the case of the mask to be worn, I think even at that moment in time, he was. I don't think he was actually wearing a mask. So I think the leadership quality has been very poor, and people have managed to see through that leadership quality. So, so far as I'm concerned, basically, as I said, short of a miracle, the writing is very much on the wall.
All right. Thank you very much, Rauf Hassan Saab, for your comments. Now, Dr.
pleasure.
Nazir Mahmood, something pretty interesting, and that is about, again, the general culture that prevails in the United States of America. I remember right before the elections of Mr. Obama, the first election, 2007-8 I'm talking about, in California, in Palo Alto, where I used to live, in Menlo Park to be exact. I mean, there was this flag of Democrats and a flag of Republicans in the same house. So I asked this gentleman who was watering the plants, that why is that so? He said, this is actual democracy. My wife is a hardcore Democrat and I'm a hardcore Republican. My wife wants to vote for Barack Obama, whereas I'm a big fan of Senator John McCain, who recently passed away, was the presidential candidate, if you remember at that time, along with the lady who was supposed to be Mr. Palin. And now what happened was, I remember that I used to think that this is so beautiful. I mean, democracy within the house. But now it seems that that culture is getting eroded slowly. people believe that this man, if Mr. X can perform something, or he is committed about giving jobs, or he is committed about raising the standards of health, or for that matter, some insurances or policies and so on and so forth. Whereas we sitting in Pakistan would look at it from a different perspective. We would see that, is he going to take good, proper decisions for Pakistan, balanced decisions for our country? What about the Pakistani and the Muslim diaspora living out there? These things matter to us. But those who will vote, they have a different consideration altogether. Nazir Saab? Okay, let me put this question to Dr. Uqab Malik.
Okay,
Uqab Malik, can you hear me?
sure.
Yeah.
I can hear you. I can hear you
please go
perfectly well.
Yeah.
Yes, you're completely right. The US general election matters to the outside world, but they have no part to play in it. As with any general election in any country, the exterior countries become bystanders, and what matters is the local population within that country is the one that decides, and that's as it should be, based on the interests of each individual in that country. So you've got to look at the interests of the different population groups, the business. You've got to look at the interests of the minority, the ethnic minorities, the religious minorities, or the religious majority, for example, that case as well, gender issues. All these different pluralistic groups would put pressure on a system to find out which way it would go. And that this election provides them an opportunity to evolve their views and announce and express their views. Now, the thing is, it's a contest. Let's not kid ourselves. There are many different parties, many different issues at stake here. And President Obama and Joe Biden represent general blocks of different issues. And there are very contested issues. And I think there's a deep polarization now in that society. And as a result, it's quite clear cut for many people, although not for others who may have been in one block and have been affected negatively by the policies or the lack of assurances or the bad performance of President Trump, who may be leaning over to Biden. They may abstain in real terms, which will be negative for President Trump in any case, primarily because he's going to lose votes in a contest. So we have to look at that. What matters is that we don't have a say in what goes on. We're just bystanders, and we're going to just wait and see what happens, and then we have to deal with whatever the fallout is. That's a reality.
Well, that's the reality as well, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Uqab Malik. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nazir Mahmood and Rauf Hassan Saab, for your participation as well. And that's all we have for this up. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.